Hello, it's time for a ReactOS rant. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, ReactOS it's kind of a Windows clone, but it's technically not a clone according to their definitions. It doesn't include any code from Microsoft Windows, but it is meant to be compatible. It uses Wine and several other layers to make things compatible. Excuse me. And basically, I downloaded the installation ISO CD image, and I created a virtual hard disk for QEMU because I learned how to do this when I was writing my Linux book. And I installed Tiny Core Linux on a virtual disk in the QEMU PC emulator. And since I already knew how to do all that, I thought, well, let's just try similar commands. So I got the ISO booted and my virtual hard disk booted, and I installed ReactOS, got the CD image booted, got it installed to a virtual hard disk, chose my options, and I actually used ReactOS, and I even had a short video I recorded of me using it. So basically, here's what I can tell you. So ReactOS is meant to look like Windows. It's compatible with a lot of Windows software from the Windows 2000, Windows XP era. So we're talking 32-bit Windows operating system software is likely to run on ReactOS. So why would somebody use this? So it's cool, obviously. So why would somebody use ReactOS instead of Windows? Well, one benefit is ReactOS is free and open source. So if your Windows becomes corrupted, or you've installed Linux, and then later you want to go back to Windows but you can't, you might try ReactOS, because if you have games from Windows 98, Windows XP that you want to play that aren't compatible with Linux, then you might give ReactOS a try. So it has like a console. It has cmd.exe just like Windows does. So you have like the DOS command prompt inside Windows, and you have that inside ReactOS. It's very similar to Windows. It's meant to be compatible. So how would I use this as a programmer? Well, I was thinking I could use it to test programs written for the Windows API in assembly language, or even in C. Like, let's say I write a program for Windows compiled in C or Free Basic or something. I then test it on ReactOS. So here's what I'm thinking, people. So basically, the Windows platform is dead. And what I mean by that is people are moving away from Windows because Windows is bloated, it's slow, it spies on you, all kinds of things. And now that ReactOS is capable of running more Windows games, and also Steam, even on Linux, can run a lot of Windows games, there's becoming less and less reason to use Windows. And I know some people are still using their CAD software, their Adobe Photoshop, I get that. But the average gamer or programmer doesn't need Windows. But I've been messing around with Windows API programming lately. I started on my Windows assembly book. It's going to be a slow process, but basically here's how it goes is when I write a program using the Windows API, well, which version of Windows am I targeting? Because if it runs on Windows 11, that's nice, but ideally, if I write a program for Windows, I want it to be able to run on older machines. So what I'm thinking is, it would be better to target ReactOS. And whether I compile or assemble something on Windows 11 and then make sure it works on ReactOS, or whether I just compile and assemble it directly on ReactOS, either way, I am developing for a Windows compatible operating system. So that's the idea, is that it would benefit me to use ReactOS, because that means if I lose Windows, I still have a way of testing whether software will work on Windows. So basically, here's the thing about emulation. So as you know, when you run a PC emulator, whether you're running a PC emulator or you're running a DOS emulator, like in the case of DOSBox, the emulator doesn't run every piece of software. Like, not every operating system works perfectly in a PC emulator, and not every single DOS game works in DOSBox, but most do. But here's the thing. If something does work in an emulator, then it's guaranteed to work on real hardware. You see what I'm saying? Because real hardware is always superior to the emulator. But if something works on the emulator, you can be pretty sure that it's going to work on real hardware. So the idea is, when I developed my DOS programs using DOSBox, I can be pretty sure it will run on a real Microsoft DOS operating system, or in FreeDOS for that matter. Similarly, although ReactOS may not be able to play every Windows game, if I was to release a game for people to play on Windows, I could use ReactOS to test it. And if it works on ReactOS, it's probably going to work on Windows XP, for example. And I'm also thinking that if it runs on, Windows 2000 XP, Windows 7, it's likely also to work on Windows 10 or 11. So that's the idea, is that ReactOS may be something I use in the future to develop programs for Windows without having to actually keep Windows on one of my computers. So right now I have Windows 11, but I may replace it with ReactOS and start using that as my primary Windows development environment, mostly just because of the fact that ReactOS is a lot like Windows, but it doesn't have Microsoft saying, "Oh, you must update whether you want to or not." You know what I'm saying? However, because ReactOS is still in alpha stage, and for those of you who don't know, in computer software, alpha means it's not very good yet. It's very early in development. Beta is slightly better, but it's still not ready for release, to be used most of the time. Whereas men talk about being the alpha male. They think that makes them the best, but if you're a software developer, that alpha means you are primitive. You are not ready yet. So it's funny how that is. I go by the software definition. I have no idea what an alpha male is. I just know it's not me. So here's the idea, is DOSBox works great for testing DOS programs. ReactOS works for testing Windows programs. And of course, Linux can be used to test Linux, obviously, because Linux is an operating system, or a kernel, technically, I know, that has so many different distributions, so many different flavors of Linux, that you can be sure there is a Linux for any platform. I guarantee you, there is a Linux for Intel. There's a Linux for ARM chips. In fact, I have one. I have a Pinebook Pro with Debian Linux on it. It was hard to set it up, but I got it working. And there's the Raspberry Pi, which also runs on ARM chips. And then there's RISC-V, which is becoming a thing. I saw a YouTube video by Lori Wired, and she was showing herself using a Linux on a RISC-V PC emulator, and she was writing an assembly program in RISC-V assembly, which I'm a little familiar with because I have done it using the RARS simulator. I've done some RISC-V assembly language. It's actually a pretty cool assembly language. So yeah, that's what but the idea is, PC emulators are becoming a good way for people to test things without having to have a dozen different computers running a bunch of different operating systems. And yes, I know you can boot multiple operating systems from the hard disk, but setting up a multiple boot is tricky. And if you do it wrong, you can screw up your whole system. That's why I never do that. I stick with Debian Linux on my desktop PC. I stick with Windows 11 on the laptop for now. But FreeDOS and ReactOS for DOS and Windows are becoming really good alternatives at this stage. And I just wanted to let everybody know that.